Somewhere in the world right now, someone is thinking about a person they can't stop thinking about. They can't sleep. They can't eat. That person is in every thought, every quiet moment, every breath. We call it love. But here's the question nobody really asks. When did that feeling begin? Because 100,000 years ago, before cities, before language as we know it, before anything we call civilization, there were people with a brain almost identical to yours. And nobody has ever been able to answer with certainty. Did they feel this? Or was love something we invented? Here's what makes this question so disturbing. We can't go back. We can't ask them. We can't interview the man who sat by a fire 80,000 years ago and watched someone across the flames. We have no record of what he felt. No diary, no letters, nothing. And yet, scientists have been digging for that answer for decades. In bones, in burial sites, in the behavior of the last few hunter-gatherer societies still surviving on Earth today. And what they've found is more unsettling than anyone expected, because the evidence doesn't point toward cold biological animals just reproducing to survive. It points toward something far more complicated, something that looks almost exactly like us. Before we go further, we need to understand something. Love isn't one thing. Biologically, scientists break it into 3 separate systems. Attraction, the part that makes one person stand out from everyone else. Romantic attachment, the emotional dependence, the need. Long-term bonding, what keeps 2 people together long after the initial fire dims. These aren't modern inventions. They're controlled by dopamine, oxytocin, vasopressin, chemistry that lives deep inside the brain. And here's the critical detail. These systems evolved. They existed long before the first city was built, long before the first word was written, long before anyone said, "I love you." Long before humans existed, animals were already experimenting with something surprisingly familiar. Wolves formed long-term pairs. Many birds raised their offspring together, neither parent abandoning the other. Some mammals, mammoths, early primates, protected injured members of their group for weeks. The foundations of attachment were already spreading through the natural world. Humans didn't invent bonding. Evolution had been refining it for millions of years. And by the time the first humans arrived, the blueprint was already ancient. Here's where it gets unsettling. A human baby is one of the most helpless creatures on Earth. Wolf pups, bird chicks, primate infants, human babies, all of them helpless, all of them needing something they cannot ask for. But the human child cannot walk for over a year, cannot feed itself, cannot survive alone. For years. This created a problem no other primate had solved quite the same way. In a world without hospitals, without food, without any safety net whatsoever, a child needed multiple adults to survive. And 2 parents working together produced far more surviving children than 1 parent working alone. Natural selection noticed. Over hundreds of thousands of years, it began favoring something remarkable. The emotional pull to stay. Not just to reproduce, but to remain. To protect. To cooperate. To return. Love may not have started as poetry. It may have started as survival code, embedded so deep in human chemistry that 100,000 years later, we still can't fully control it. But survival logic only explains so much. Because what anthropologists found when they studied modern hunter-gatherer societies, groups living lives closest to the ancient way, wasn't just functional cooperation. It was jealousy, courtship rituals, mate preferences, competition, grief. Competition for desirable partners appears in virtually every human culture ever studied, without exception, which tells us something important. Ancient love wasn't peaceful. It wasn't simple. It was messy. It was desperate. It was dangerous. People have been heartbroken since before writing existed to describe it. They competed for attention, lost sleep over someone who didn't return their feeling, felt the specific grinding pain of watching the person they wanted Choose someone else. The same pain you felt, the same pain that has never changed. But before we reach the human evidence, something needs to be said. Humans aren't the only species that appear to mourn. Modern elephants have been observed standing beside the bones of dead relatives for hours, sometimes returning to those same bones across multiple years. Some whales have been documented carrying dead calves at the surface for days. Certain primates show signs of extended distress after losing members of their group. They don't simply move on. They linger, which raises a question that's difficult to ignore. If grief exists in animals with far simpler emotional systems than ours, then perhaps grief itself is far older than humanity. Perhaps it was already there, waiting, by the time the first human stood over the first grave. And this is where the human story becomes almost unbearable. Archaeologists have found burial sites dating back tens of thousands of years. Graves where bodies were laid with care, with ochre, with flowers, with tools left beside them, not discarded, arranged. Think about what that means. To bury something is to acknowledge it mattered. It means someone stood over that grave and felt something that required ceremony, something heavier than inconvenience. And there's more. Some skeletal remains show evidence of people who were seriously injured. Broken bones, lost limbs, and yet survived for years afterward, which means someone fed them, someone protected them, long after they had stopped being economically useful. Long after survival, logic would have said, leave them. They didn't leave them. They stayed. This is the moment where science stops being distant and starts being personal. Because if ancient humans stayed with the broken and the injured, if they buried their dead with flowers, if they competed and ached and grieved, then what we're looking at isn't primitive behavior. We're looking at ourselves. 100,000 years ago, a hunter returning to camp after 3 days, scanning the fire, looking for one specific face, a woman watching the tree line, counting the hours, feeling that specific, hollow dread of someone who hasn't come back yet. You know that feeling. You've felt that feeling. So did she. The technology is different. The language is different. The world is unrecognizable. But the interior of that emotion is identical. Love is sometimes described as a modern luxury, a product of civilization, of comfort, of too much free time. But that's not what the evidence says. The evidence says love, or something that functions so similarly we'd call it that, existed before agriculture, before cities, before language could name it, before anyone had words for what they were feeling. They loved in silence. In a world with no Valentine's Day, no wedding rings, no love songs to borrow the words from, they still found one person and felt something that required no translation. So the next time love feels overwhelming or irrational or like too much for one person to carry, remember, you are not weak. You are not broken. You are 300,000 years old. And every single person who came before you felt exactly this.